So would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Sarah Schear. I am a fourth year medical student at the University of California, San Francisco. I grew up in Maryland. And did you just hear that alert that went off on my computer? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I think I should close any of my applications that are giving me alerts. I think it's just my email. Sorry about that.
Okay. So you're from Maryland.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to tell the story of how we met?
Sure. Yeah. So this was back in September 2019, and I had been, I think, really becoming more and more concerned about climate change since the previous year, during the extreme wildfire season with the Camp Fire, and also seeing a community that I had lived in and worked in South India, in Kerala, that was really devastated by the monsoon season that summer. Millions of people were displaced from their homes, and I was just realizing how climate change is this crisis that is already harming people's health tremendously, and I was looking for a way to find my voice or my way into supporting action on climate change. And I saw these youth-led protests, and I just immediately wanted to join and support them. And so in September 2019, there was a climate strike planned, and I had been trying to rally some of my classmates in medical school to come out. And I think through one of my classmates, I learned that a doctor at Kaiser was also trying to organize medical folks to come out to the protest, and got connected with you, Ashley. And gosh, we got on the phone, and I was so excited to connect with another person, another young woman in medicine who was, starting to orient their life to working on this issue. And so, yeah, we got together and turned out a bunch of physicians and health students to the strike, and it was really a powerful experience.
Mm-hmm. So those two, climate fueled disasters of the Camp Fire and then the monsoon in Kerala, can you remember a moment where you kind of saw those individual disasters and how they are connected to the global warming, disaster?
Yes, I think so. The monsoon in Kerala hit first, and I was just wrapped reading the news, and I was texting with my friends there via WhatsApp, and trying to figure out what I could do from a distance to help. And it was reading the news coverage and seeing climate change mentioned in the news coverage that I thought, okay, I need to read more about this. I had, heard about climate change. I had even gotten a lecture about it and its wide-ranging health impacts. But somehow it always felt too big, and I didn't quite know what I could do as an individual.
Yeah.
And then once I saw how it was harming this beautiful community that has done almost nothing to contribute to the crisis. Mm-hmm. And, I'm living in a wealthy country that has contributed the most to the crisis historically in terms of our emissions. And so I think it was just reading that news coverage and having this moment of kind of moral reckoning in my heart, where I thought, I can't ignore this anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it was being really personally connected to the beauty in Kerala. And then thank God somebody was writing about climate being related to it in the news, because that's not a gift.
Yes.
So that helped to connect it for you, was seeing an acute problem and then the news coverage connecting it to the bigger problem over
Yes.
something that you love, basically.
Yes. And then there was sort of a cascade of events because I was I started reading about the Paris Agreement and about what scientists were saying about how long do we have left to meaningfully change what the future is going to look like? How much longer do we have to take action and protect a livable climate? And some of what I was finding was really scary, like, projections of years to rapidly draw down emissions. And so I thought, I was coming up on a time in my medical education where I could take a gap year. I thought, wow, if we only have, if it's only on the order of years, what can I do? And I reached out to a friend from college, actually. He is a climate campaigner with Avaz, this global movement to address climate change and other kind of social injustices. And he happened to be coming to San Francisco for like this international climate gathering. And he stayed on my sofa for one night. And he sat with me, and it was like breaking bad news. It was like the way that we learn to do with patients with really serious life-threatening illness. He broke the bad news to me about tipping points in the environment, and I think did it in such a way that was really encouraging to me that I could make a meaningful difference and use my medical voice. Yeah.
We should send him a thank you letter. We should send him this. Wow. Yeah. So he kind of like, it sounds almost like a rite of passage, so sort of to like face the situation.
Yeah, I think it helped me face it. And then I believe it was in the very beginning of 2019, I saw the Sunrise Movement sit in Nancy Pelosi's office in Washington, D.C. And that is when I think I really felt courage. And I really felt that, yes, there is a movement building and I can join this.
Yeah. Because it felt like there was community to join, like you weren't alone.
Exactly. I wasn't alone.
Yeah. Wow. I know that picture. I don't know where I was when I first saw it, but like the visual of the sit-in was so powerful.
Yes. The young people running through the halls with unfurling banners for Green New Deal and telling their stories, bringing those stories to the seat of power and just saying it's not acceptable to keep ignoring this.
Wow. Absolutely. And how would you say your life has changed personally since you faced climate and the gravity?
Yeah, I think that I definitely experience more fear and worry on a day-to-day basis about climate change and about what the future holds. I also have found this wonderful supportive community. I think people in this movement are so beautiful and passionate and supportive and caring. And so I've made all of these wonderful friendships. And I think I also feel a very strong sense of purpose because we, you know, the global scientific consensus is we really have a decade to dramatically mobilize our society and change how we do things. And so it kind of gives me my, you know, I've got my sense of purpose. This is what I'm going to work on for the next decade. It's clear.
And the communities that you have joined are kind of the communities that you're working on that shared purpose, and it has been something that's really sounded like added to your life.
Yes, definitely.
I hear you. I couldn't agree more. So then there's the facet of you that's a physician in training. And what is it? So did you take the Hippocratic Oath?
Yes, well, we took a physician oath when we received our white coats at the beginning of medical school. Yes.
Do you remember anything in that? Like, did any of that, or you know, the idea of that, like, what does that have to do with climate advocacy?
So I couldn't tell you every word in it, but I distinctly remember that the oath that we took said that we would stand up against unjust policies that harm our patients. And I think that resonated so deeply with me because this, I mean, is a policy issue and it's directly harming our patients. And so I felt like, you know, addressing climate change is squarely within our Hippocratic Oath. You know, it's written in there. And I think, you know, also when you're training to be a physician and you take that oath, it's basically saying every human life matters. I'm going to care for every human life equally. And if we take that really, really seriously, then thinking about how climate change affects people so unequally in this world, and how the impacts are falling hardest on low-income people, Black and brown communities, migrants, children. You know, those are the connections I see.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a commitment to care for people, no matter their, you know, any of their individual identities. It's just that they're people.
Right.
And to look out for their best interest.
Yeah.
Yes. Are there any physicians, current or historical, that you think that you've like looked to as justification for climate advocacy, or who you think kind of exemplify that protection of human life, whether it's, you know, in keeping with business as usual, or whether it's forcing change?
Yes. Ooh, and I love this question, and we'll continue to think about this. But a few physicians who come to mind are, you know, John Snow in England, who discovered the water pump that was the source of the cholera epidemic, and you know, raised the alarm and was able to get that pump shut down. I know we've talked about the parallels between shutting down cholera-laden pumps and shutting down oil pumps. But I think that use of a public health principle to be able to shut down a source of harm has been really inspiring. I've also been inspired by, the group of physicians who, during the time of the threat of nuclear war, mobilized to oppose nuclear armament and really made a difference there. And more recently, I've been really inspired by a group called Doctors for Camp Closure, and the physicians in that group all across the country who are mobilizing to show the inhumanity of conditions in our immigrant detention facilities, and who are fighting to shut them down and to bring public health interventions and medical oversight to those facilities.
Yeah. So they're making a social issue and social injustice kind of a health issue, a medical issue, a medical community concern.
Yes, I think when you're facing these really wicked, disheartening problems, to face it as an individual health professional and be so in touch with that suffering, you really need to find community to mobilize and to help give voice to that. And so I think in facing climate change and feeling that way about climate change, it really helped me to see what Doctors for Camp Closure was doing.
As like a model for how to link arms and connect within the medical community to face those enormous challenges that can't be solved alone.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. And so it sounds like that that's something that gives you hope, is the finding community. Is that right? Yeah. Are there anything else that gives you hope in the face of what we are facing?
Yeah, I think it's mainly community and seeing what other people are fighting for in this movement, how people are identifying their own gifts, like what they have to give, and then giving that, whether it's I'm a pretty good writer, or I love to make art, or I am really good at talking to my community and my friends and getting them to vote or to join an action. Or I'm really good at reading the medical literature and synthesizing it. Finding those skills that you have to bring to the movement and then giving those. That gives me hope. And I also say courage, because I think some days, if the sky is orange and the air is bad and people are having to evacuate their homes, it can be really hard to feel hopeful. But I can still feel courage.
Tell me more about that. Like how are those different for you?
Yeah, I think it's almost a palliative approach. Like, I love palliative care, and before I focused most waking hours on climate activism, I was pretty involved in palliative care activism. And I think in facing a really uncertain future, and a future where there could be a lot of suffering, finding ways to do whatever you can to make it better, to mitigate it. It doesn't necessarily require a hope for a totally different outcome, but courage to talk about it, courage to try to make the best plans you can to help, and support people and support their humanity and ability to have the best life they can.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So it's like courage is more of a willingness to act despite fear, versus hope is kind of might be alone or might not do anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That is a better word.
You helped give me courage, Ashley. I remember the first time I ever spoke at a public hearing.
Where was that? Tell us.
That was at the Bay Area Air Quality Management District meeting in San Francisco. Their scientific advisory group was having a meeting about whether they should change the what is considered a safe level of chronic air pollution exposure. And there was an opportunity for public comment, and I had never done that before. And for some reason, the meeting planners moved the public comment period to the very beginning of the meeting instead of after we had had the chance to listen to all these illustrious speakers teach us about air pollution. And so I was nervous, but you pulled me out of my chair. And
I did.
We went up to the dais and just spoke from the heart. And I think it really moved people. And I heard from some of the other community activists, climate activists, that it meant a lot to have health professionals there in their white coats speaking up.
Yeah, I remember that moment well. And I think, my heart rate was probably like 150 or so when I was talking. But that is a beautiful example of courage, despite kind of the formalities of like power that make it really uncomfortable for anybody to say anything because you might be wrong or you might not have anything valuable to add. Yeah, that was really memorable. And yeah, we had just joined the club, but we knew what the meaning was. And I think that's where we came from, which is kind of enough, we don't have to know, there's enough, we don't need to know too much science. It's more the meaning, which I think has really been undervalued in climate science and the kind of climate, in climate science. And I think the movement is bringing the meaning to what the science was lacking for decades. Courage. Yeah, beautiful. And then maybe my last question is, have you had any conversations with attendings or other medical students where they were like, I don't really know if that's kind of something for physicians to be engaging on. It's not really in our wheelhouse. Like, can you remember any conversations like that?
I think I've been lucky not to come across that. I've mostly been rotating in pediatric settings because I'm preparing to apply to pediatric residency, and every attending I've talked to has pretty much said, that sounds really great and important. I actually remember giving a presentation to the adolescent medicine program at the end of my rotation here. And one of the oldest attendings told me that it reminded him of walking out of medical school during the Vietnam War to protest the Vietnam War. And he said that he felt like this was the issue of our generation and our time. That was really moving to hear that from him.
Yeah, you don't necessarily know that there will be support, for making our profession prioritize something new. I think it can be really scary.
Yes.
And intimidating.
And I will say there are different types of opposition. It's not necessarily that people will openly say it doesn't matter, or that it's not a good thing to work on. But at this point, also putting up, resistance to prioritizing the issue, or saying, well, we have to slow down on this, or we can't focus on this right now, is a way of undermining progress, because we have so little time left to deal with climate change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What might you say? I heard that last week. Not right now. The COVID is a disaster, which is true. But what do you say? Like, if you were to be speaking to somebody right now in a position of power, who said, this is really important, but maybe next year.
Yeah. I would try to connect action on climate with what they love and care about and are concerned about, because climate is connected with everything. It's connected with COVID, because we are seeing these extreme weather events that have been fueled by climate change, displacing people during the pandemic. The economic crisis that we're facing, where people are, having to double and triple up in their homes. That is, raising the risk of spreading COVID, but also people's vulnerability to climate impacts. And so finding ways of highlighting how much this issue is connected with the other issues that matter to healthcare. I was also recently talking to a friend who's an emergency medicine resident, and she has really been working to make the case to her hospital that sustainability is economically advantageous right now. When hospitals are facing, an economic shortfall, actually decreasing our waste, actually having PPE that is meant to be reused. There are ways in which there's a strong economic case for acting now on climate as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you couldn't have said it better, that it's about, we can connect it to everything. And so if somebody doesn't feel the urgency, connecting it to what is their current priority, to help connect the dots, and show the interdependent dynamics. Yeah, beautiful. Awesome. Well, I really love hearing your story and working with you. And I couldn't agree more with the purpose part. I think my life since engaging in climate movement groups is more meaningful than ever before.
Yes.
By far. So thank you.
Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, we'll share it out and we'll talk soon. Okay. Bye.
Bye.